Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Puck Talk Live. This edition, kind of like Sesame Street, is brought to you by this guy, who for some crazy purpose decided that 16 years after stealing something in Italy, he decided to go back to watch Juraj Slafkovsky and Team Slovakia upset Team Finland. Was it worth it? Probably for him, but seeing us out tomorrow's Valentine's Day, probably not for her. Let's go live. Hey everybody, Coach K here for another edition of Puck Talk Montreal Live this Friday night. It's February 13th. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day. Make sure that you take care of your loved one, please, because you never live it down. I did it once. Biggest mistake of my life. And 26 years later, I'm still married, thankfully. But all that being said, take care of your loved one tomorrow because it's an important day for all of them. You should love your better half every day of the year. But for one special day, give them a bit of extra loving, will you? I know I will. Now that we got the idiot aside who decided to go to the hockey game and watch Juraj Slafkovsky and then get arrested by Italian police, let's go over some of the fun things that happened this week in the world of hockey, especially surrounding our Montreal Canadiens. Now, if you guys haven't already done so, I'm going to ask you to please leave a like for all the videos, subscribe to my channel, and of course, hit the notification bell so that you know every time we go live or every time I post something, it'll come up in your feed. And the other thing I want you to do is go back and take a look at some of my other videos. Because, you know, there's not a lot to talk about these days, given the fact that everybody's at the Olympics. But from time to time, certain things squeak out. I did a mock draft, got hammered for it, apparently, because nobody thinks my opinion matters. But that's okay. We still have nothing to talk about, so I figured I'd do it one way or the other. And, of course, there's my debate about Arber Xhekaj. If you haven't already looked at it, please do, whether we trade him or whether we hold on to him. We could talk about it later in the chat, of course, as everybody starts to join in on the live chat as well. But let's get to the topic at hand. And let's start with the Olympics. And as I mentioned, Juraj Slafkovsky, Canadiens players are front and center. Slafkovsky, in his first game against Finland, had a pair of goals and an assist, leading them to a 4-1 upset win in the first game of the men's tournament. And then, of course, Nick Suzuki. Here's a second goal by Slafkovsky. Nick Suzuki scores in Canada's opener yesterday. Here's his goal as he tips in a pass from Connor McDavid. And that's pretty much all the Canadiens did. Today, of course, both Slovakia and Team Canada played. Slovakia won 3-2 over Italy. Slafkovsky getting another assist. Team Canada played versus Switzerland, a game that was expected to be really, really competitive, and it ended up not being that way. Canada getting the best of Switzerland by a score of 5-1 and winning their group. Now it's whether or not they win overall. And then, of course, there's the fun thing in the first game that we all saw, and that was Slafkovsky trying to get his hat trick. And if you missed it, he loses his stick. It's like Lucy pulling the football away from Charlie Brown. Loses his stick, tries to kick at the puck, swing and a miss, falls over, then all of a sudden it goes back in front of the net, and on the backhand it deflects off a Finland player and goes in, and they celebrate. You can't make this stuff up, right? And yes, I did bring up a Peanuts reference. Yes, that's how old I am. But you got to laugh a little bit, right? It's the Olympics. And if you don't laugh now, you never will. And I know that earlier this week I put out a video about whether or not I like amateurs or the NHL pros at the Olympics. It's not that I don't enjoy the hockey, okay? Don't get me wrong, because some people called me out on it. It's not that I don't enjoy the hockey. I most definitely do. But here's the thing, right? Best on best, you call it that even without Russia. I find that unfair. Because if there's going to be any competition for Canada, there's two countries that are going to be competitive, or three of it maybe. You're talking about Sweden, you're talking about the US, and you're talking about Russia. And Russia not being there kind of dims the light a little bit, despite the fact that it is still a tough tournament to win. Without Russia there, is it really best on best? I don't think so. And on the other hand, when you take a look at the pros, there's a balance, right, when it comes to the amount of pros that every country has. You know that the U.S. and Canada are going to be stacked with professionals because they got plenty of them to pick from. From the NHL, what I mean. And then you take a look at teams like Sweden, Slovakia, the Czech Republic. Yes, they have a few, but a lot of their players do come from Europe. So is it actually fair? It tips the scales a little bit the way I look at it, right? Amateurs, it levels the playing field a little bit, despite the fact that, yes, the three countries I mentioned, including Finland and Norway and some of the other Scandinavian countries, they have some amateurs that can rival those that play at the amateur level in Canada and the U.S. But I still think Canada and the U.S. and Russia would have a distinct advantage given their training styles. But I still love the hockey, right? So when you take a look at how the Canadiens are doing, right? Obviously, Slafkovsky with 4 points has started his tournament out fantastic. Nick Suzuki started on the line with Connor McDavid. Now he's ended up on a line alongside Hagel and Tom Wilson. Yes, that Tom Wilson. And it still looked good anyway in today's hockey game, so I'm not going to complain. He's only got 1 point, but you're hearing his name every time he's on the ice, whether he's out there. He's always out there at 5-on-5, and sometimes at the tail end of killing penalties. And he's always in the play. He's involved. So that tells you that he's being coached the right way by Marty St. Louis. The same holds true for Juraj Slafkovsky, who has been, if no other word describes him, dominant so far at this tournament as far as drawing attention to himself and still being able to create points. Today's game versus Italy really put a focus on him to make sure that he didn't get the best of them, and he didn't, but his teammates picked up the slack. Good on them. They win 3-2, and I believe they're going to win their group as well, but there's still the U.S. to worry about, I believe. I haven't really looked at the group split up, right, because I think there's 4 different groups, but they're still in contention for overall supremacy, for lack of a better term, when it comes to Slovakia, although Canada does have the goal differential at this point. Here's the fun part. You take a look at Alexandre Texier of France. He's played 2 games and has not looked good doing it. He's one of the few NHLers on the Team France, and he really isn't leading that team. You know, he's not driving play for them, and that's sad in a sense. Not only is it sad for Team France because they were kind of expecting him to be one of the guys pushing the pedal forward, but, you know, instead they're getting Anthony Beauvillier, who time after time in international tournaments steps up for Team France. But then it's also going to be a little bit of a hindrance, I think, to the Montreal Canadiens because his lack of ability to be able to actually get into the games a little bit is really going to hurt him, I believe. Coming back to play with the Canadiens, it may very well hurt his effectiveness. And that's kind of the risk you take in these tournaments. Although it's not the same kind of risk as Kevin Fiala today, because it looks like when Tom Wilson landed on him and he broke his ankle. But that being said, the games can get into your head when you're playing best on best, right? Am I really able to compete at this level starts to get in your head. And so when it does, there's not much more you can say or do, you know, when it comes to that kind of stuff. And then there's the curious case of Oliver Kapanen playing with Team Finland. I shouldn't say playing, on the Team Finland roster is what I should say, because he didn't dress for the first game versus Slovakia, and then today he was dressed, but didn't see a lick of ice. And I'm trying to understand what the hell Team Finland is trying to do here, right? You're talking about a kid who's got 18 goals on the season, one of the better scorers in the NHL on Team Finland, and yet you're not giving him any ice time. What exactly are they trying to prove? Has he pissed off the coaching staff in some way? For all intents and purposes, all I've ever heard is that he's a good kid and a hard worker. So if that's the case, why not give him a sniff? Okay? Finland is not breaking down doors when it comes to their style of play or their ability to finish. They're depending on guys like Yoel Armia to lead the charge. Really, right? And I love Yoel Armia. Don't get me wrong. He was great for the Canadiens, but he's not the guy that's going to get you to the promised land. He's a support player. You need a guy like an Oliver Kapanen, who has played extremely well for the Canadiens so far this season. He's the rookie leader in goals in the NHL, for crying out loud. And you don't give him a sniff of ice during the first 2 games. Shame on you, Finland. Not just because I have nothing to talk about on the show, but the sheer fact that you're messing with a kid's psyche. What's wrong with you? Down the road, do you honestly think he's going to say, yeah, I'm going to come play for you, say, at the World Championships? As an example, if the Canadiens get eliminated early? from the playoffs? I wouldn't. If you don't see a lick of ice time, my words, screw you. And the same goes for any player who gets put on outside of a goaltender who's a third stringer. Any player who's expecting to get a little bit of ice, right? And Kapanen had no reason to think otherwise, given his play so far, right? An honor to be selected to the team. An honor to be benched by the team. No, it's not. And so Finland really has to look at themselves and say, you know what? I got to put this kid on the ice because I need some kind of energy, some kind of dynamo, somebody who's going to drive play a little bit, and he's irresponsible on both sides of the ice. What more do you want from a kid, right? So give Kapanen a chance to play, because otherwise Finland's not going to go very far in this tournament at all. They've already screwed the pooch once against Slovakia. Can they afford to do it again? I don't think so. But I digress. Now, getting away from the Olympics a little bit, let's take a, and we can talk about it later in the chat. I'm not killing it here. It's just my own little monologue here. I'm cutting it short. Now it's time for us to look at the Canadiens, because the Canadiens are back on the ice practicing in Brossard. You would think, what the hell? You've got a full week off. Nobody's forcing you to be on the ice, but it just speaks to some of the dedication that some of these players have, especially guys that have been injured, like Alex Newhook, who is out there working on cutting, putting pressure on his ankle, turning and changing direction very quickly, making sure that his body is able to withstand the rigors of the NHL. And while this drill is hard enough to do with a bad ankle, right, and it seems fine, this one here is absolutely nutsoid, and good on Adam Nicholas to say, hey, cut back and forth at least 5-6 times before you turn and take a shot on goal. It's not a fancy drill. It's not a crazy drill. It's not something that, you know, people are going to say, hey, I need to put that in my practice. But for somebody who's coming back from injury, it certainly is the type of drill that shows you where his ankle is vis-a-vis his return to play. And we know that Alex Newhook was having the best start to a season he's had in a long time. And when he went down with injury, we all had a collective sigh, because we were like, here we go. Just when we think that everything's going to go hunky-dory and we're going to get to the playoffs easily, one of our best forwards goes down with an unfortunate injury. That being said, the Canadiens have been able to maintain their position, second in the Atlantic, which is great. But adding Newhook back, who's going to be extremely hungry to get in there and continue his play the way he was before, is encouraging, right? So hopefully that continues. And then when you talk about other guys on the ice, Ivan Demidov, Kirby Dach, and Jake Evans on the ice. Right? Here's Dach and Demidov working on one-timers. And yeah, it seems like nothing, but one's working on backhand cross-ice passes, and the other guy's working on his one-timer. And then when you take a look at what happens at the other end of the ice, you've got Jake Evans working against a goaltender, coming in, just taking a quick shot, glove save made by the goalie. And then you're thinking to yourself, I've never seen that guy before in nets. He must be one of the guys from the American Hockey League. Nope. Not an American Hockey League player. Not a current player at all, I should say. The guy in nets is actually David Savard. Yes, the David Savard that blocks shots like a madman. And here he is again. Watch this save he makes on, I think it was Dach. No, not Dach. Well, look at him. He comes across, sliding across, making a save, and then they're complaining about it. And good on David Savard for helping the guys out. You can tell he misses the game. You can tell he didn't retire because he didn't love playing. He retired because, you know, his body just couldn't stand it anymore, right? So it is what it is when it comes to Savard. But when you take a look at goalies as well, you have to look ahead at the future of goaltending. I'm not talking about changing the way goaltenders play or rewriting the book on, you know, the butterfly, depth in the crease, tracking pucks, angles, etc. All that's been written by men that are much smarter than I am when it comes to the goaltending position. What I am talking about is the All-Star game. Now, you know, when you take a look at goalies, what do you see? Breakaway competitions, you know, different types of things that revolve around the players more than it does the goaltender. What does the goalie do? He goes in and he stops the puck. Well, the KHL came up with a new idea. And I want to hear what you guys have to say about this because I freaking loved it. I laughed my butt off when I saw this video. And that is a competition at the KHL All-Star Game with Goalies Hardest Shot. I'm not kidding. Watch the video here. And in some cases, it's really like, here's a pretty good clapper here by Ivanov. Decent speed. Wasn't too bad. He got it on goal. He got some decent velocity on the shot. Not too bad for a goalie, right? Then comes this guy who, whoop, just completely misses the shot. And then later, here comes this guy who absolutely takes everything into his slap shot. Getting it in, that's Galkin, getting it in at 103 or 106, kilometers an hour for a goalie. Not too shabby, huh? But it's the entertainment value, right? While we laugh at the All-Star Game when we see guys in the skills competition come out with wigs, come out with funny costumes, trying to do crazy moves during a shootout, what's funnier than a goalie trying to win a hardest shot competition? In fact, why don't you get the goalies out there to see who's the fastest skating goalie, right? See how fast they can go around the ice. Because after all, when there's that long change and they have to go to the bench for a delayed penalty, they need to get their ass out of the crease to the bench rather quickly. So who's the fastest guy who can do that? We don't know, right? They've never measured it. So why not do it, right? No, it's not something to take seriously. It's for entertainment value. So let's entertain ourselves, right? Get the goalies out there with their goalie sticks, hardest shot, let's go. In fact, why don't you see about an accuracy competition where goalies get a chance to shoot at the empty net on the other end of the ice, right? How many times can a goalie put it in the net with, let's say, 10 pucks inside of 30 seconds? From one end of the ice to the other. It would be fun to watch, right? Some guys would be better at it than others, right? Obviously, the goalies that can handle the puck better, they will be the ones shooting. A guy like Jordan Binnington would have a blast doing it because he's so good at handling the puck, right? Could you imagine Ron Hextall doing that type of thing in the All-Star Game? It'd be awesome, just for fun. Not that Ron Hextall is an All-Star, in my opinion, but it would just be a blast. Just stop being so conservative. You know, here's the worst part about the NHL. They worry about the Winter Classic. They worry about the Stadium Series. Those games, I mean, if you're going to call it a Winter Classic and you're going to have it inside an indoor stadium, it defeats the purpose. The idea of the Winter Classic, or the original Heritage Classic between the Montreal Canadiens and the Edmonton Oilers, was to get two of the league's most storied franchises together, right? To play outdoors at Commonwealth Stadium, where it's as cold as, you know, your backyard in the middle of winter in Canada. And so you see the steam coming off mouths, the famous shot of Jose Theodore with a toque on his head to try to keep his head warm with a mask on. Seriously, you don't get any purer than that when it comes to hockey. Outdoors, in the cold, guys, cheeks red, trying to stay as warm as possible. Going to the bench, heaters there. It's just, you know, having an outdoor game in an indoor stadium in Miami is kind of stupid, right? What do? You turn on the air conditioning to simulate winter? It makes no sense, right? An outdoor game needs to be outdoor. I wish they could have one in Montreal. I wish they could find a location where it would work. Like, for me, 25,000 people at Molson Stadium would be a good thing, right, for a game. But apparently, NHL standards, it doesn't fit. But NHL standards fits having a game inside of a dome stadium. Go figure, right? Or Tampa Bay playing Boston under a roof. That makes more sense than having actual snow outdoors, right? What about when they did it at Fenway Park, right? Wasn't that great? Or at Wrigley, bring some of the history of baseball into the game of hockey and indoctrinate those fans. But no, we go to Tampa, Florida, and we go to Miami, Florida, to try to bring in fans that don't need to be brought in. That fan base is fine, right? But could you imagine maybe having an outdoor game in Columbus or maybe an outdoor game at PNC Park in Pittsburgh. That would be another idea, wouldn't it? What about a game in Buffalo? Wow, that'd be awesome, wouldn't it? And more than one. Why not? But you need to do it in Montreal. You need to do it in Toronto. Winnipeg would be awesome, but I think everybody would freeze in Winnipeg because it's so bloody cold. But it would be a perfect place for it. Why not have it outside of an NHL city? Why not do one in Saskatoon or in Regina at Mosaic Stadium? Wouldn't that be a good place? Especially if you're looking at the Canadiens, right? You go out there, you have a game between the Canadiens and the Jets at Mosaic Stadium in Regina, you'll sell the place out. Guaranteed. You want to make money? That's the way to do it. Think outside the box. Not the same thing over and over again. What's next? You're going to have one in LA? At SoFi Stadium? No. You need to have these outdoor games where it means something, where it's meaningful, right? Go and have one in Minnesota. Have one in Detroit. They've already done it in Chicago, right? Why not have one everywhere else? It would be fun, wouldn't it? But it is what it is, you know, when it comes to the outdoor game and the All-Star game for that matter. Bring something new that engages fans, that makes it fun. Nobody watches the All-Star. Do you watch the All-Star game anymore? I don't. The 3-on-3 was a luxury 1 year. After that, who cares? You get back to the same thing. Why not have a game between the Stanley Cup champions and the rest of the best from the NHL like they used to? Just call it, for argument's sake, whatever. Or even at that, you want to make the All-Star game different? How about you have the Stanley Cup champion, the runner-up, and an NHL All-Star team, and have the three teams play each other on consecutive nights? That would be an All-Star break. That would be fun to watch. Winner take all. Will it be the Stanley Cup champ? Will it be the runner-up? Or will it be the All-Star team? Who knows, right? But never in a million years has the NHL thought of it. What idea do you think would work to engage fans? Honestly, I'd love to know, because I'm running out here. That being said, we've talked about the Olympics. We've talked about the Habs players at the Olympics, and we've talked about the Habs coming back from injury. And there's one thing that I haven't brought up yet in regards to that I think needs to be discussed. Where the hell is Sam Montembeault? Where is Jakub Dobeš? I'm sorry if I have to say this again and again and again. In the summer, the excuse was that Montembeault's groin wasn't healed and he needed to heal it. Okay, you get a pass. But at this point of the season, when you're trying to find your game, wouldn't this time be the best time to work with Marco Marciano on your deficiencies? Or is he? And they're just not showing us. I'd love to know. If he's not there, then great. Then we know that maybe, just maybe, he doesn't give a rat's ass anymore. And to me, that would be strike number 3 for him. I'd be done. If you're not there working with Marco Marciano on your game to make it better, what else are you going to do during the break? You've struggled all year. You've had a couple of good games. One, in fact, just recently, right, where you had a spectacular performance versus the Jets. And you think that's enough? One game? And you're done? There were enough things in that game that you did well, but there were some things in that game you didn't do well, and you got lucky. Being too far in your crease, back, you're still there, right? That goes without saying. He made some great saves. He played extremely well, but there are still issues with him being too deep in his net and stuff like that. That needs to be worked on. I'm not worried about Dobeš on that front. I've seen him at the top of his crease. I've seen Montembeault on the top of his crease. Why he doesn't do it consistently is beyond me, but it comes down to the fact that he's not practicing right now. What better time would there be to get him into a good habit than to have him on the ice with Marciano and work on him staying at the top of his crease, managing his movement in the crease, learning how to push off again, strengthening his groin? I don't see why he wouldn't be out there. Could you imagine, okay, he takes a week off, as an example, right? His groin tightens up during that week off. And then when he comes back to practice, he pulls the groin again. How smart would that be? Wouldn't it be a better idea to at least get a little bit of work in? Stay warm, loose, and not tighten up? Nope, we're not there. And that irks me. Not just from the player's perspective, But from the team perspective, I know that this week is supposed to be a week off for everybody, okay? But you see players like Demidov, like Dach, Matheson's out there. In fact, Matheson was out there with his kid on the ice. The cutest thing you'd ever see, right? And you've got Evans out there. You've got Savard helping out when you can actually have Montembeault out there working on those cross-crease slides and making saves. Why shouldn't you be out there? Explain that to me. I would love to know. To me, it doesn't make any sense. It's the perfect time. Wouldn't you agree? Or are you going to wait till the guys are forced back and you don't get as much one-on-one time with your coaches? When you go to practice, right, you get your first little bit of time on your own, right, when you get there early. You can get there. Normally, the Canadians practice when they're not playing. They practice around 11 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock. And a little bit earlier than that, you get an opportunity to go out there and work with whomever you want, whether it's Adam Nicholas, in the goalie's cases, whether it's Marco Marciano, on specific items that you need to work on. So why wouldn't you do that now when you've got the entire rink to yourself, right? 10:30 to noon, or to 1 o'clock, I should say, nobody's there. So why wouldn't you go and practice? I'd love for somebody to talk to Montembeault next week when he comes back and say, you know, you had a whole week where you could have come in and worked on, strengthening your groin and work on your game a little bit. How come you didn't come in? Were you that tired that you had to take a week off? I would love the answer to that question. But of course, nobody's going to ask because then they get ostracized by the organization. But it's a question that I would love to be asked, like seriously. Talk about Class A journalism. Let's be honest, right? Ask the question. So, all that being said, I'm going to stop criticizing. I'm going to stop talking about things that are never going to happen, like the All-Star game change, right? I'm going to stop talking about the Olympics. I'm going to start talking about you. Time for us to go to the live chat. So, Violet, I noticed you're here for attendance purposes. Very nice. Thank you. The story on the fugitive on the run was riled coming in from Montreal MUFC. And by the way, now that I saw his handle, it reminds me, if you haven't watched it yet, go take a look at the collaboration between me and Drew Deeks on my page, a little bit lower in the list. We did a podcast earlier this week talking about certain issues on his show, and it was a lot of fun. And so I'd like you guys to support Drew a little bit if you haven't already, and go take a look if you haven't watched the video. But yeah, I don't get it. Do you honestly, you're talking about a country where the mafia runs everything. And I say this because, I'm married to an Italian woman, so I'm not afraid to say it. But the fun part is, do you honestly think that a country that's run like that is going to forget something you did 16 years ago? No. And there's no statute of limitations on robbery. So whatever he stole must have been really important for them to snatch him at this hockey game. And the fact that you could have watched it anywhere. You could have watched it at home. You could have watched it, in a bar, whatever the case is. But no, he goes to a public venue where there's cops everywhere just to watch your team live. If that's not the definition of fanatic, I don't know what is. But yeah. How you doing, Terry? Nice to see you out there. I'm sitting and thinking what's up at the Drew Deeks channel, and you know what? Quite good cooperation is happening there. Congrats, Mr. K, and what a nice surprise. Yeah, well, the fun part is that Drew and I have touched base a few times about talking together, right? I know that he does a show occasionally with Shane Gaumont, and of course, Drew famously used to do Habs Tonight as well. Drew's one of those guys that got me back into podcasting, right? Or whatever, streaming live, even like this. Fact of the matter is that Drew does it very well, right? Strict to the point, short shows, whatever the case is, and he's really, really on point. And I see some other channels out there that, they're a little bit too raw, a little bit too invested in the rumors that are going around from other people, instead of, like I try to do and what Drew tries to do, is provide you with a little bit of our own opinion as opposed to somebody else's. Talk about a situation. Okay, let's go over the facts. Let me tell you what I think. Isn't that what reporting is all about? And so Drew does it well. So that's why I want to make sure that you guys do support him as well. Yeah. Oh, yay, TGIF. Best TV shows when that thing came on. What thing are you talking about? This? Okay. Violet, Slav is the only thing I am interested in at the Olympics. Well, you're not interested in what Nick Suzuki does, Violet? And he's the captain of the Canadiens, for crying out loud. And wouldn't you like to see Oliver Kapanen play? Come on, you got to care a little bit, at least. Terry, good on you, man. 37 years with the same woman. That deserves a round of applause, number one. And number two, congratulations, because finding love like that these days doesn't happen, much like my wife. And number three, make sure you spoil her tomorrow, because she'll remind you that it's been 37 years. Yeah, you're spoiled with some good ones. The Hockey Junkie, North of... I haven't watched North of 67, actually, because just the fact that it says 67 in it makes me think it's a Leafs podcast, but I'll check it out. And the Hockey Guy as well. I've watched a few times. That's definitely good. Violet, Slav doesn't need a stick. He can play offense or defense without it. Yeah, well, he didn't look too good trying to play offense on that one. I can tell you that. I am Wonderful. Agreed. No Russia feels weird. And Olympics ancient times would include all, even war enemies and worse. And guaranteed to and from travel. That's a great point. Even, well, I wouldn't say during World War I or World War II, because I wasn't old enough to think about it, right? But the whole thing about the Olympics is, competition, even amongst enemies. You saw today, I think it was a cross-country skier from Iran crossed the finish line, and other people were there hugging him. Had nothing to do with the politics, had nothing to do with her country's political views or their stance against the U.S. or any other country. It just had to do with athleticism. And that's what the spirit of the Olympics was all about. That's why it was created, right? So, you're absolutely right when you mention that. And yeah, without Russia, it is weird. Just hockey. I don't care about the rest of the sports, but just hockey. Violet, you're from U.S. and a military vet, and you think that if Russia is banned for aggressions, we should be too. But the TV market is too big, and the Olympics is a big money grab. You're not wrong about it being a money grab, although the luster of the Olympics has changed over the years, right? I used to have a cousin, or I still do have a cousin, who used to be an Olympic athlete, right? Long distance runner. And now he's retired and he's training his own sons and other kids in Greece. And the thing about the Olympics was very simple. Like for some people, especially amateurs, it's the end all be all of the reason why you become an athlete, right? Even the cross-country skiers and such, there aren't as many competitions. Biathlon, who the hell does biathlon, right? Just think about that. There's already snowboarding competitions, right? There's already alpine competitions. How often do you see ski jumping, for example, right? There aren't that many competitions. So when you get together and you celebrate the Olympic spirit, right, it means something. And, when it comes to Russia, and Russia is not just because of the aggressions, by the way, Violet, they did have a state-sponsored drug system in place. And that's another reason why they got suspended, above and beyond what's happening against the Ukraine. But that being said, I mean, it's sad that they're not there, because they deserve to be there just like we do. That's just like anybody does. I mean, whether it's U.S., Canada, Ukraine is there, or could be there. They're in the Olympics. Why shouldn't Russia be there? If it's okay, it's been what now since the last time Russia has been in the Olympics? Since after Sochi, 2014? So it's been 12 years. Don't you think that's long enough for their athletes? I'm not talking about the country here. I'm talking about the people that actually play. Don't you think it's enough for them? Especially the ones like an Ivan Demidov, for example, would most likely be at the Olympics. Imagine, Alexander Ovechkin being able to go to one final Olympics before he retires. He wants to go to the KHL when he retires, right? So he can finish off his career there. Could you imagine if he got a chance to go back to the Olympics, what kind of a tournament he would try to have? That's the thought process I have. If he's good enough to be in the NHL and he's good enough to be the all-time goal-scoring leader in the National Hockey League, is he not good enough to be an Olympic athlete? My answer to that is yes. So why are you punishing the athletes for what their government does? It just doesn't make any sense to me, but I hate talking politics. Oh, yeah. Macklin Celebrini. I know we're talking about Habs on this show, but man, oh man, is he having a good tournament so far. I mean, he's a sophomore in the NHL, but it doesn't show. He's playing extremely well so far in this tournament. He's got a pair of goals, one in each game, and he's looked really, really good for Canada. Zev Cave 9550. Are you giving shit to Violet for being here? I'm trying to extend it. It's kind of funny. Montreal MUFC. Tell me, was it not funny? Was it not cool to see the goalies do that? Do you not think the goalies got a kick out of it? Like for everything else, all they do is face pucks, right? All day, every day. Do you not think having a hardest goalie shooting competition is fun for them? I do. Zevel Cave 9550. Frankly, I think the All-Star is just passé now. You're not wrong. Unless the All-Star game had meaning, right? Like I was talking about Stanley Cup champions or the runners-up and, an NHL All-Star team from the rest of the teams in the league get together and play in a small little, call it a 1 day or 2 day tournament, whatever it is. What other glorified reason is there for it? It's for their sponsors. It's for the money. It's for the sponsors to come out and see the best players put on a show. There's no hitting. There's no nothing. They come out, they do the skills competition. They're laughing the entire time. They come out for the All-Star game playing 3-on-3, so it's a glorified overtime session for 3 periods. There's just nothing to it, right? It's like the baseball All-Star game. Although back in the 70s and the 80s, there was a little bit more meaning to it. And they even, decided on who gets home field advantage for a while in the World Series. Although eventually they realized one league was meaning more than the other and it wasn't really fair anymore, so they pulled it also. But there's only so much you can do with the All-Star game. And, I'd love to see it go back to East versus West again. Back to the old school game, right, where you're playing against each other. That's all I want. I don't want, or you could split it again even more. There's enough teams in the National Hockey League, you can go north, south, east, west, right? So you would have the Florida teams, Dallas, and you would have the California teams in the south. In the north, you'd have the Canadian teams, and you'd have Midwest and East, and have them in there, right? Wouldn't that be a fun one? Imagine all the best players that play for Canadian teams on one All-Star team. Think about that for a minute, right? You'd have the likes of Nick Suzuki playing alongside Austin Matthews. Well, I had to bring up his name like an idiot, but anyway. William Nylander. You take a look from Winnipeg, who would you have? You'd have Kyle Connor, Josh Morrissey. On defense, who would you have? Would you have Laine Hutson out there? Of course you would. Goaltending. Who would the goaltenders be? Connor Hellebuck. Who else? I mean, it creates all kinds of different questions, right? And it would bring some flavor back. A little bit anyway. Have 2 games and split them between the 4 teams. Make it interesting. Don't just overload 2 teams with a bunch of players. Something like that. Something different, right? Play 2 teams versus 2 teams and then play a 3rd game between the 2 winners. Done. Or even play a 3rd game between the 2 losers and then another game between the 2 winners over 2 days. I think it'd be great. It'd be fun, right? And present some kind of trophy. The All-Star Championship goes to the team from the North, as an example. Be different, right? The goalie hydraulic, crypto hydraulic. Yeah, let's do it. The goalie chase. Okay, here's the question though. If you're going to make the goalie skate, who's chasing him? Do you put a wild animal out there like a bull, or do you put another player or another goalie and you race between two goalies around the ice? I mean, the idea is limitless, right? But I'm joking about the animals, by the way, because that'd be cruel to the animals. But still, it'd be fun to watch a goalie trying to run away from a lion that's on the ice, for example. But that's just me doing a Looney Tunes cartoon in my head. Here's an interesting conversation. Joffel Cave 9550. You still think they should change the point system to the international rules? 3 points for a regulation time win. I have been talking about that since my days doing Montreal Hockey Talk. 3 points for a regulation win, 2 points for an overtime or shootout loss, 1 point for an overtime, an overtime or shootout win, 1 point for an overtime or shootout loss, and nothing if you lose straight up in regulation. It would change the dynamic of the standings completely, and it would really weed out the weaker teams versus the teams that could win games in regulation. Just think about it, right? We know how many games Montreal has won in overtime and regulation, right? They probably end up at the bottom of the standings based on the fact that they're winning in overtime, just as an example. And they're letting that 1 point fade away. A team like Tampa, who doesn't go to overtime as often, would be well ahead in the standings because they have that extra third point. So it would make things different. I totally agree with you. And I think that, it should be a topic of discussion here as well for everybody. Great game today for Canada. Tough, rough game. Nice goals, big hits. That Celebrini kid is going to win a lot of trophies in the NHL. Wow, he's amazing for his age. You missed that one word, didn't you? But I put it in there for you. Sorry, Terry. I'm ad-libbing. But yeah, no, Celebrini's awesome. And, it gets you to thinking, how did he not win the Rookie of the Year last year? Well, number one, it was because he had less points than Laine Hutson. And number two, the impact that Laine Hutson had on the Canadiens was a little bit higher. That doesn't mean that Celebrini didn't deserve to win the Calder. There were just a lot of good candidates last year, just like there are a few of them this year. So we'll see how that turns out. But at the end of the day, Celebrini is exactly as advertised. A great hockey player. He's going to be a leader for years to come on the San Jose Sharks. And that team, like the Montreal Canadiens, is only going to get better as they progress through the rebuild. At first I sat there and I was wondering, if they were doing a great job rebuilding that team. But I got to tell you, I have no issue with the way they're doing things there. So good on them. But yeah, Celebrini is definitely as advertised. The NHL lacks European spirit. You're not wrong. I mean, if there's one thing that I enjoy doing when I watch NHL games, like even when you watch the Olympics, right? European games, when the referee does something wrong, you're not yelling crazy shit at him. You're whistling, right? And it's a more civilized way of doing things, but it's a really clear way for fans to let the referee know that they think he shit the bed. Whether he does anything about it or not remains moot, right? But the atmosphere at a European game is completely different. The fans, much more colorful. That's number one, as opposed to the stoic, I'm wearing a tush suit and tie at the Bell Center to watch a hockey game sitting in the lower bowl. Try putting on a jersey for once in your life, instead of going there with your thumb up your ass, for lack of a better way of putting it. So many corporate seats sold at the Bell Center. So many people that go there with their business associates, or they give away their tickets to companies that they deal with. And you get these stuck-up people that are in the stands that are only there for posterity, not really hockey fans at all. The real hockey fans sit up in the Desjardins section and above, where things get nasty, down and dirty. They're the furthest away, but the loudest in the rink. So, it's sad to say, but yeah, I think the European environment and the way people are in Europe is a hell of a lot better than what we see in the NHL. That goes without saying. We're a different culture, not missing anything. I don't think we're a different culture, Terry, honestly. Hockey fans, no matter where you are hockey fans, if we didn't have those crazy fans, would the Bell Center or like even the Montreal Forum have ever had Kid Mercury as an example, right? And for those of you who don't know who Kid Mercury was, Kid Mercury used to come into the Bell Center wearing his jersey, his hat with a couple of lightning bolts on the side of it, and his trumpet, getting the fans engaged in the game. He wasn't an employee of the Montreal Canadiens. He was a season ticket holder. So why say that it's not us? Because it was us. There's nothing wrong with going to a game with your face painted, right? If it's good enough to take your kids down to Upeville and have them put a little CH on their face, why isn't it good enough for an adult to go in there with their face painted completely, ready to go out there and cheer on their team till death do us part? Honestly, nothing wrong with that. The reason why we don't do it, because a lot of people go to games after work. They don't have time to get ready. On weekends, it's a little bit of a different culture, right? Because a lot of people don't work on weekends, right? It's not part of the corporate culture. But when it comes to weekday games, yeah, you're not going to see people painting their faces. I'm going to go to the office. Hang on, I'm not leaving yet. I'm in the bathroom putting on my makeup. That won't happen. But it's not a different mindset. It's a different type of the difference is, as it was mentioned, culturally, in the sense that in Europe, working is, I can give you an example with Greece, right? Because I know it best. People work in Greece from 8 to noon. And because it's too hot at noon, from noon to about 3 o'clock or 4, they take naps, a siesta, like they do in Mexico. Then at 4 o'clock, they get back up to go back to work till 10 o'clock at night, in most cases. So they can prepare for things differently. If they don't go to work in the afternoon, it's not the end of the world. They just get their work done the next day. The culture of the importance of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis at work isn't the same, right? Cost of living is a little bit cheaper in Europe as opposed to the way it is here. So in certain countries, anyway, I can't speak for all of them, but I know in Greece, the cost of living is completely different. I have a friend of mine who moved to Greece permanently years ago, and he decided to open a restaurant there. And he told me straight up, what would have cost him 250 grand here, cost him 45 grand in Greece. Cost of living is a little bit cheaper. So, it is what it is when it comes to that kind of stuff, right? And the mindset and mentality about living is different in other places outside of North America. So until you get to that point, the fanaticism, for lack of a better way of putting it, is going to be different wherever you go. Europe one way, here another. John Cooper dressed as Tony Montana for an outdoor game. Just awkward. I didn't find it awkward. It was fun. It's just like when I'll go back to the Heritage Classic. When everybody came out, Toe Blake was there wearing his fedora, and everybody came out wearing their hats and, their old school hats, and wearing their blue and white sleeve jackets, and, old Canadiens logo on their stuff. There's a little bit of nostalgia there. And honestly, it represents what Miami and the Florida area is, right? That Spanish heritage, walking around with a white suit, red Hawaiian shirt, split open, showing your chest hair. I mean, isn't that how people dress in Miami, to stay cool at least in that humid temperature? I mean, there's nothing wrong with representing where you are. I don't think it's awkward. It's just funny. But it looked great on John Cooper. Don't get me wrong. Shootouts should be banned. There's a discussion to have. How many of you people like shootouts? I don't. I think they should play overtime for the first 5 minutes at 4-on-4, then go to 3-on-3, and then just stay there until the game's over. It doesn't take that long, right? 10 minutes tops. And then if it doesn't happen, keep it going, right? At 3-on-3. Somebody's bound to score and make a mistake. They're so fatigued eventually, right? But no, we have to go to the shootout. Bring back the tie, for crying out loud. Let them each get a point for lasting 65 minutes. I don't care. But there's no need to actually have a winner in every game anymore. You call it parity in the National Hockey League. I call it disparity because of the fact that the win in a shootout, it misrepresents what the 65 minutes was worth. If that's the way you're going to treat things, turn around and say, okay, do you want to play a full game? Do you want to play a full game? No. Okay, let's just go straight to the shootout. Whoever wins gets 2 and I'll get 1. It defeats the purpose of the game, right? It takes away the importance of that game. So, yeah, take away the shootouts. I don't care anymore. Like, it was a nice little novelty, but go back to the way things were before. Change the point system. 3, 2, and 1, right? If you win in overtime, you get 2 points. If you lose, you get 1. And if both of you get through overtime, you both get a point. Simple, right? The only goose egg would be if you lose in regulation, which is a real punishment, right? It's the way it should be. But take away the shootout. I agree. I don't know about you guys, but the fun of the shootout is, what happens? Oh, everybody picks up the puck, they skate wide, and they try to come in to give themselves a different angle. We see it every game. Nothing different. Nobody tries any fancy moves anymore. What's the fanciest move we've seen lately? A slap shot from the hash marks? I'd take it out. I agree totally with Xhekaj 9550. Outdoor games in Newmarket, Saskatchewan. Alaska, man, that's a great idea. Could you imagine having a game that, I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Mystery Alaska. It stars Russell Crowe and guys that play hockey on an outdoor rink, and they leave their dressing room and skate through all the way to the rink. Like, there's no locker room to walk from, right? They just on their skates all the way down to the rink. That movie was awesome. And I think playing an outdoor game in an environment like that would be awesome. Or even a better one. Think about this for a minute, okay? Picturesque Lake Louise, Alberta. Why not have a game right there? It doesn't have to be against the Oilers and the Calgary Flames, although it could be. It could be a home game for Calgary. But think about it. The mountains in the background, people watching from the edges, just something pure like that, right? It brings back the essence of what hockey was. Played on a frozen pond. It would be perfect, right? Same with the Alaska idea. I listen, I've got nothing to say about that. I think it's brilliant on your part, Xhekaj. Let's see. Hutson can't miss a day without putting his skates on. Newhook is going to be a great addition coming back. Third line, Newhook, Danault, Texier. I wouldn't even put Texier there, honestly. I would leave Danault between Anderson and Gallagher and put Newhook on the wing with Jake Evans at Texier. That line would be interesting. Not Danault. I think Evans has a higher offensive upside than Texier, than Danault does. But that's just my opinion. But Hutson hasn't been out there lately. He's taken a couple of days off, right? He's watching his brother. So, it is what it is. And you're allowed to do that, right? He'll be back. And he'll be out there doing two-a-days before you know it. Here's another smart idea. Montreal MUFC. I wish earlier someone in Montreal converted the old Blue Bonnets Racing Stadium into an outdoor spot for major events like Toronto has. I think that was discussed, right? Because if memory serves, they had a YouTube concert out there, right? Where they put the grandstands up and everything. It would be a great place for it. I don't know what they're doing with it, though. They did put up a couple of strip malls there, right? But other than that, I've never been in behind there to see exactly what they're doing. I think they built condos, for lack of a better thing to do, right? So, but it would be a great place to put it. I no issues with that. But here's another idea for you, right? Where DeCarry meets the Metropolitan, there used to be a spot that was owned by Insight that is now the Royal Mount Shopping Center. It's a big, ugly monstrosity, right? It's somewhere where you expect to go in and go shopping for high fashion, right? How many people do you know that live in that area that can actually go out and buy stuff at the Royal Mount? There aren't that many, right? And all the stores in there are high-end stores. There's not any, you're not going to find an Ardennes in there or a Claire's. You're not going to find a garage or a Dynamite or a children's place to buy children's clothes. You're going to find all high-end, big money stores. Hugo Boss, Coach, the list goes on and on. I thought for years that spot would be the perfect place to put up a baseball stadium. Right in the middle of the city, easy access from the West Island where the majority of baseball fans are, still available to corporate Montreal via the DeCarry Expressway, plenty of space in behind for parking if you needed it. I just thought it'd be a great place, but they decided to make it a shopping mall instead. Just, the priorities in Montreal are a little bit different than they should be, I think, anyway. But yeah, the old Blue Bonnets racetrack would have been the perfect place, or the Hippodrome is what they called it afterwards. Would have been the perfect place to put up a stadium like they do. They have BMO Field in Toronto, or for that matter, they even have the old exhibition grounds, right? Where did I go here that I lost everything a second ago? Let's keep going down the chat. Hutson needs an A at some point. Violet, not yet. He's still a little young. You still have a lot of veterans on this team. You take a look at the guys that have A's right now. Anderson, Matheson, Gallagher. I mean, you're okay with those guys as leaders, right? When some of them retire or get moved, then you think about it, right? But at this point in time, I mean, don't put any extra on Laine Hutson. He's already a magnet for attention, right? You don't want him being out there and worrying about having the A on his jersey and not be able to do things. I mean, having the A is a great responsibility, but it can also be a hindrance. Think about what that letter did to Max Pacioretty's career after he became the captain. We were all happy with him scoring 30 goals on the season, but then suddenly when he became the captain of the Canadiens and he got injured and wasn't scoring 30 goals, all of a sudden everybody got angry at him because he was the captain and should be able to lead by example. It was a little unfair on Max, right? And I was guilty of that from time to time as well. But there's no need to put a letter on him too quickly. Is that okay? What I like about the Habs' new management is they're thinking a structural way and willing to be innovative in managing the team. That's extremely true. And the thing about them is they have a plan, and they're sticking to it. It's not like if something comes, and they've said it from the very beginning, if there's a deal that's presented to them that makes sense to make the team better, they'll look into it. But they're not going to go looking for it if they don't have to. And right now, as we've said time and time again, especially on this show, the Canadiens need to continue to progress. Last year, as we mentioned, they made the playoffs, and they did it by the skin of their teeth, getting the last wild card spot, backing into the playoffs, losing many of the last few games of the season. Not the way you want a team to go into the playoffs, and it showed in the first round they were done and buried. You want them to go in with confidence, with attitude, with a chip on their shoulder, with the ability to rest some of their better players going into the playoffs. You want them to try to clinch a little bit earlier than the last game of the season. That's your next progression for the team. And then you're going to see a little bit better results in the playoffs. Everybody equates the playoff failures of the Montreal Canadiens to their size. It's not. While size helps, right? If you take a look at a team that's a little bit more energetic, you look at the Washington Capitals as an example. They didn't need to throw all their players out there towards the end of the season and run them roughshod until they got into a playoff spot. They had already clinched, right? So they were able to tone it down a little bit, give their guys a little bit of a breather, a little bit less ice time, whatever the case is, because they didn't need to get into the playoffs. It was already done. For the Canadiens, they were feverish to get into the playoffs, playing nonstop, playing their best players, 20 minutes, 25 minutes a game sometimes, especially on defense. And that takes a toll on players. So you get into the first round and everybody's gassed. They still put forward an effort, but they have nowhere near the energy you would expect from a team that didn't have to work so hard to get into the playoffs. So that's where Montreal is now. For everybody that's thinking the Canadiens are going to get to the conference final this year and maybe a Stanley Cup, no, stop. Okay? You want to be a perennial contender, you continue up the road to that. First role was to be in the mix. They surpassed that and actually made the playoffs. Now that they made the playoffs, they want to comfortably make the playoffs and maybe win a round. Okay? Then after that, you're thinking playoffs, conference final, and then beyond that, you're ready to become a contender. So, as I say, Joe Luna disagrees with me 1,000 times on this show every time I say it. It's 2 years away. Be patient. We've been patient this far, and we love the results that this team has brought us, right? I don't think anybody can argue that fact. Why jump the line at this point? It wouldn't make any sense, would it? I don't know. I personally, I wouldn't do it. I always wondered if Montembeault was simply a lousy student of the game. Before the change of goalie coach, a number of mistakes looked like a repeating pattern. And that was my point, right? When it came to Eric Raymond and his inability to change the way Montembeault played, right? And I talked about this when I did a few episodes called The Art of the Save, where I talked about his depth in goal, right? His lack of aggressiveness hurts him, right? And I don't know the reason behind that lack of aggressiveness. Is it because he doesn't trust his ability to move laterally? Is it because he wants to be closer to the net to be able to get back quickly? Does he have no confidence in his skating ability? It's hard to say, right? Because I'm not there working with him personally, but at a certain period in time, somebody had to notice something, and Marco Marciano did. And when he went down to the American Hockey League for a few days, Marciano worked with him. Montembeault came back a different goalie. But then fast forward a couple of weeks back with the Canadiens, and he started getting back into bad habits. And it was obvious to everybody that he was. And so once that obviousness came through, the Canadiens had no choice but to let Raymond go. And now you got Marciano working with him, or he should be working with him, I should say. And I don't think he's a lousy student of the game, because you don't get where he is without being able to learn from your mistakes and move forward, right? But I think that the Canadiens aren't holding him accountable enough to his bad start this season. There has to be a level of accountability where, like, Monty, we're telling we're telling players they can take a week off, but you shouldn't take a week off. You should be here working on your game. But that didn't happen, right? So we'll see. Not sure why the targeting of Montembeault. He played well last year and has progressed well ever since being cleaned out of Rivers. He's had a down year, and all seems to be on his case. Here's the thing, Slafkovsky. It's not that we're on his case, right? But the thing about Montembeault is that he hasn't moved forward, right? You're right about what you talked about when he was claimed off Rivers and how good he's become since then. And credit Eric Raymond for the amount of work he did with him. No doubt there, okay? He deserves a little bit of credit for that. But he got him to a certain level. And unfortunately, Raymond can't get him beyond that level. So now it's Marciano's turn. And it's not that we're bashing Montembeault here. Last year, he played 62 games, well beyond his previous limit of 31. It was a little too much to put on a guy who used to be the third stringer in Florida, as you so eloquently said, right? Claimed off waivers. But the thing about Monty is this. Over the past year and a half, even despite the fact that everybody said he played well, there were things in his game that always irked me and irked others as well. Guys that have been in this game a long time didn't like certain things that he did in the net. For example, playing so deep, right? There are a lot of people that didn't like it. And while he made saves at certain points, his butterfly, not good. His use of his stick, not good. All these things that should have been worked on to augment this game were left alone, right? Whether it was by him or Raymond, okay? A goalie can't be effective if he doesn't engage his stick. A goalie can't be effective if his butterfly has holes in it. Oftentimes, Montembeault would slide laterally and his knees would come up off the ice. He can't do that. If you're going to have an effective butterfly, you got to learn to have your legs down. Montembeault plays with a very tight V in his butterfly. Dobish's is wider. He needs to work on his flexibility. That hasn't happened. So it's all these things. That's why people get on him, because what didn't come through last year because of the fact that his defense played so well is starting to come through now. When he was counted on, when his defense was struggling earlier this year, they were prevalent in his game. They came through. And finally, the Canadiens got a real look at what Montembeault is as far as his goaltending level is concerned. Now they're trying to correct it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's why people were so hard on him, because when you needed to make a save, he couldn't do it. And not because he didn't want to do it. He just didn't have the tools in his tool belt to do it. Now, hopefully with Marciano, we'll be able to get beyond that. But it's a wait-and-see type of game, right? So we'll see what happens. I disagree with this one, Zeffel. The Canadiens do not need a goaltender whose goals against average is 2.5 and their save percentage is above 915. I disagree with that completely. The team is good enough to win the way they are right now because they're scoring. The Canadiens had a lack of scoring before. It's not all about the goaltending, right? We had Carey Price for how many years, and his career save percentage was what? But the problem with Carey Price wasn't Carey Price. The problem was that the team in front of him couldn't score goals, right? So now we've got a team that can't score goals, but a goalie that can't stop a puck. That's the difference here. And now you got to get the goalie up, and you're not talking about a 915, 905, 910 even would do it. And their goals against doesn't have to be 2.5. It needs to be just below 3. Because after all, the average case in the NHL is if you allow 3 goals or more, you tend to lose more games than you win, right? And if the Canadiens ever got into a scoring funk and they couldn't score goals, then having a goaltender that can be below 3 would go a long way to maintaining their status. Right now they're scoring, and that's fine. But if they were to go dry, it would be a problem. Let's see here. Terry, you have lovely patience, man. Congrats. Being married 37 years has nothing to do with patience. I would be mean, but I'm not going to do it. Depray Mac, welcome. If not making the playoffs or losing the first round, management will be blamed if goaltending was status quo. And that is very true, right? But I don't think it's a status quo thing with goaltending. It's for lack of a better way of putting it, their goaltending isn't bad, right? But it needs to be better, right? It's average right now, just like it is around the National Hockey League. If you take a look at the goaltending around the league, there's a handful of goalies that stand out, like a Logan Thompson. Take a look at the bad year Jordan Binnington is having, right? And yet he's starting for Team Canada and looks great while he's doing it, right? What's the reason for that? Well, it's because the St. Louis Blues are a dumpster fire right now. That's part of the reason. So it is what it is, right? So he's having a bad year. That doesn't mean he's a bad goalie. On the Montreal Canadiens side of things, though, it's a little bit different because the start of the season started bad for Montembeault right off the cuff. Part of it was his summer training with Newhook in Trois-Rivières messed him up. Part of it was the fact he was coming off a groin injury and didn't really get to train during the summer. And then when he got to the preseason, he didn't look great, but you leave it alone because it's the preseason after all. It's not the end of the world. But then going into the regular season, nothing changed. His game never really came back to him. And that's what you worry about here. What was the reason behind it? Part of it was the fact that his technique was not improved. Part of it was his mental state wasn't there because of what happened in Trois-Rivières. And I don't know what exactly they did to train him as far as his neuropathy is concerned. But whatever they did really messed up his game. And the Canadiens know about it, and the Canadiens have told him to stay away from there too, from what I've heard. Speaking of Oliver Kapanen, he won't get much of a sniff out there. Finnish coaches have an awful mentality towards youngsters. Remember when Mikko Koivu was benched while Saku was captain in 2004? Yeah, I remember. And you're not wrong. But they need a boost, right? Finland is not going to win with, I'm not saying they will, right? But they have a better chance of winning if they have Kapanen in the lineup as opposed to not in the lineup. From Terry, hey coach, do you think the biggest need is a big right-hand defenseman? How about going after Parayko and when Reinbacher is ready, Carrier goes? We know that what Wilson did to Carrier in the playoffs last year. Asking. Look, I'm not a crazy fan of Colton Parayko's. While I think he's a good defenseman, I don't think he would fit with the Montreal Canadiens because of the fact the Canadiens focus on getting defensemen that can move, right? That big right shot defenseman, in effect, is supposed to be David Reinbacher. Would I mind them going after Parayko? It's going to cost them, right? If they go out for somebody like Colton Parayko. And it would cost them quite a bit. He's not going to come cheap. So, I don't know. And they're going to have to give up a prospect. They might have to give up a roster player, right? Who that would be, don't know. But I don't know if I'm willing to change the chemistry on this team and put in a player who can't play man-to-man. That's the other part of it, right? I talk about it all the time. When you bring in new players, they have to adapt to the system in Montreal. Man-to-man as opposed to box plus one. Parayko's not a man-to-man type of player, right? He's not overly mobile. He's an effective defenseman in a box plus one situation, but he's not overly mobile, and he's effective in the system he plays right now. But if he comes to play man-to-man, forget it. I mean, he doesn't have the mobility to be able to work that way. If people were complaining about the mobility that Arber Xhekaj had, Parayko's is just as bad, if not worse, when it comes to lateral movement. So I don't know if he would fit in the Canadian system where he's the Canadian type of player, honestly. He might be good for some other team, but he has to fit what the Canadiens are looking for defensively, right? High hockey IQ, an ability to move, makes a good first pass. That's not Colton Parayko. So, I mean, right shot defenseman. You've got Reinbacher coming up. You've got Bryce Pickford in the wings. The Canadiens are going to be fine. We just need to wait. That's all. But definitely a good question from Terry there. The South Africa thing was a little different when it comes to apartheid, right? Because you're not talking about cheating, and you're not talking about a war against another country. There's a civil war in South Africa when it came to apartheid, right? And it was, for lack of a better way of putting it, it was racist. Right? It was white versus black, pure and simple. The oldest battle in the world. And the reason why they were banned for 30 years is because of the fact that the Olympic Committee despised what they were doing. If you're going to find equality in sport, right, you need to find equality in your own country first. And so that's the reason why I think South Africa was banned for all that time, until apartheid was abolished, and then they were brought back. And it was clear as day. What about an outdoor game against Montreal in Toronto? That would be amazing. It would be, but Toronto's not the center of the universe for me, or the center of the hockey world. The center of the hockey world on this side of the Atlantic is Montreal. Okay, despite the fact that Toronto's got the Hall of Fame, despite the fact that Toronto's got the Maple Leafs, who haven't won a cup since '67, despite all of it, despite the fact that the NHL has their office in Toronto now instead of Montreal, while it was Montreal's, the NHL's head office was in Montreal for decades. I don't want the game in Toronto. Toronto's not cold enough. Montreal's colder. Find a way to have it here. Simple as that. That's the way I put it. Violet. Zamboni driver chases the goalies. Woo! That'd be a fun race. Who goes first? Who wins first? The Zamboni driver? And does he have to race with his cloth down or cloth up? Right? Does he resurface the ice at the same time? I'm just kidding. But yeah, that would be fun to see, wouldn't it? Thanks, Terry. It's going to be 27 in July. But yeah, it's being married for this long. She's my partner in crime. So yeah, definitely fun. And at this point, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, it's no guessing game when it comes to what your wife wants and doesn't want. So I'm right there with you. Ari, the All-Star game. The AHL All-Star game broke down by 4 conferences. What if we had an interdivision tournament with all 4 divisions? Agreed. Even better idea. Take the best players from all the 4 divisions, put them on a team each, and have them play against each other. East versus, or no, not even East versus West. Have them play against each other, and then have the 2 winners play and the 2 losers play a 3rd game. Simple as that. I agree with that. That works. Tony Tardrew, Celebrini is the real deal. Absolutely. Mirage on, it took me a second to read this one, by the way, Mirage on Ice, but yeah, thank you. I looked at it, Mirage on Ice. I felt like, you ever see that segment on Sesame Street where they put the letters up and the guy's like, Dior. That's what I felt like reading your handle. So, let's see here. Mirage on Ice. I must say that these Olympics have been underwhelming thus far. Maybe the coverage from out media is not as it should be. In the past, I always look forward to watching all the events. I would tend to agree. Here's the thing, and I know it's going to age me a little bit, right? I just think they brought too many events in, right? I'm a bit more of a traditionalist, right? You had cross country. Biathlon is not a traditional sport or competition by anybody, but biathlon is an old world Olympic sport, as is cross country skiing, as is alpine skiing, as is hockey, as is ski jumping, bobsled, luge. But, you bring in skeleton, which I don't mind, but seriously makes no sense to me, being on the board the other way around. I mean, Okay, you have a death wish. But anyway, bringing in all the freestyle sports, whether it's freestyle skiing, the half pipe with skis and snowboards, the snowboard cross, like all these so many different events. You don't have to. It's become too, what's the word I'm looking for? It's become too overbearing. You don't know what to watch first, right? I'm a traditionalist. I'll watch the alpine skiing. I love the bobsled and the luge. Love them. Always have, always will. Love watching hockey, obviously, and love watching the ski jump, right? Who doesn't remember Eddie the Eagle from Great Britain, right? In 1988. Well, whoever wasn't born then. But if you haven't seen the story of Eddie the Eagle, you haven't lived, because here's a guy who they told Eddie, don't jump, you're going to get killed, and he jumped anyway. So that was the true nature of the Olympics, right? But I think it's been over commercialized. Hey, No Channel, how's it going? Where we got best NFL game last season ended in a 40-40 tie. No problem with ties. That's a great point. That's a great point. There's nothing wrong with ties at all. It just, No Channel. Happy with the point system. Actually makes it interesting all season since it's so close. And there's the opposite argument, right? Because there's so much parity in the league right now, everybody's inclined to be interested, right? But, and the teams that aren't good always filter down to the bottom, right? Even if the point system is as it is. But it's not so much about the parity. It's about realistically seeing who's where vis-a-vis the standings, right? Wouldn't it be easier, even when you're evaluating your own team, to say to yourself, okay, we win too many games in overtime, right? Where you're getting 2 points instead of 3. We need to become better at winning games in regulation. What's it going to take, right? And that's one of the questions Montreal asked earlier in the season when they were winning so many games in overtime and the shootout. So, you get a better look at your own team and the assessment of your own team when it comes to that, right? So take the shootout out, change the point system. It doesn't hurt anybody. And at the end of the day, when you take a look at the NHL and the way it's structured right now, because of the way the salary cap is, the parity is almost there anyway. The only disparity is the thought process that coaches have and managers, right? If every manager thought the same way, then every team would play the same way, right? If every coach thought the same way, every team would play the same way. So there's that correlation between the two. So if you change the point system, but the thought process remains different among all the general managers and coaches, you're still going to get that differentiation and that parity in certain cases. So I don't think changing the point system actually hurts anybody. Yeah, if you haven't watched Mystery of the Last But people, find it. It's a great flick. Mirage on Ice. The NHL will never go 3-2-1 because many teams will be out of the playoffs sooner and thus less income from fans. I would agree that after 5 minutes, 3 versus 3 is still tied. Both teams get a point. Yeah, you could do that anyway. But don't you think that there should be some kind of reward for winning in regulation as opposed to it just being a tiebreaker? I still think that, getting that extra point would make things much clearer as far as the standings are concerned. Crypto Hydraulics. Speaking of Kapanen, my son had a situation, 5 games dressed up and no ice. He didn't understand this. He could sit in the audience or stay at home or what. He was sad, even if the team won. Crypto, what level does your son play? Just put it in there and let me see. I'd love to know. Because, dressing a kid for 5 games and not letting him play is hogwash. I don't care what the level is. It's disgusting. Just let me know. Please, Crypto, let me know. No Channel, that's not even funny. Trade Hutson for Austin Matthews. So here's one thing I'm going to say, and people that are listening in from Toronto, I apologize up front. I am not trading one of the best players on the Montreal Canadiens, best team players on the Montreal Canadiens, for an asshole. I don't care how many points he can put up, okay? I don't like Austin Matthews' character. It has nothing to do with his ability to play. You're not going to bring a cancer like that and I know people don't like using that word, but I'm not going to bring anybody like Austin Matthews into my locker room as a coach. If you do that, I'll leave. Because if there's one thing that I know about Austin Matthews that has been unequivocally true since the beginning of his career, the only person that Austin Matthews worried about is Austin Matthews. He doesn't give a shit about his teammates. Okay? Being happy about taking the C away from another player on your own team who is just as good a leader, if not better than you, just for posterity, is bullshit. And it's to pad your ego. I don't want ego players on my team. I like the way the Canadiens are. The fact that they like being with each other, playing with each other, having a laugh with each other. I enjoy that, and it makes for better hockey. Not what you see in Toronto. Toronto hasn't had a team since the 80s, or since the 90s, I should say. There's been so much individualism on that team, it's sickening. Whether you're talking about Matthews or Nylander or anybody else. So don't talk to me about Matthews. I don't want Matthews in Montreal. Screw that. The NHL schedule doesn't make sense. I prefer 2-game series. Example, Habs go to Vancouver, play 2 games there. Vancouver following year goes to Montreal, plays 2 games. Most games are home and away, be 2 games. Deep Mac, the reason why they do it is because each fan base wants to see the team, right? So that's why they have a Western road swing and they travel in the West, and there's an Eastern road swing for the Vancouver team as well, because we want to see the Canucks come to Montreal. The Vancouver fans, they want to see the Canadiens. Think about this for a minute, okay? Places like Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, Winnipeg, before they got their NHL franchises, all of those markets, well, maybe with the exception of Vancouver because they had the Canucks, but all of the other markets in Canada outside of Toronto, even Quebec and Ottawa, when you take a look at Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, call them what they are. But there were so many other fans in this country that were Canadiens fans prior to those other teams joining the NHL, that's the reason why the Canadiens travel out west, right? And it's the same in LA. It's the same in Florida. It's the same everywhere. They want to see all these different teams. Going there one year and playing 2 games versus Vancouver, and then playing 2 games versus Montreal, Vancouver playing 2 games in Montreal a year later, it kind of defeats the purpose, right? You're going to save money on travel, big deal. But, it's better to have them travel and keep the interest there year after year. Coach, do you think Hughes will try to get a physical D that they trust, or a talented forward, or keep working with Xhekaj? See, that's my question, Raj, on ice. I wish I could say yes. I want them to continue working with Xhekaj because I've liked his progression, right, and how he's played this year. But the fact that they don't give him a chance, it bothers me because it hinders his development, right? And he's exactly what he comes listed as. He's a team player. Whether he plays 5 minutes, 7, 10, for him, he's just happy to be here, right? But it's hurting him long term, right? What's his career going to look like down the road if he doesn't develop properly? I get what the Canadiens are trying to do, right? It's like, you don't put your prized horse in the Kentucky Derby before you break him, right? And it's the same thing with Xhekaj. I think they see a higher ceiling for him, but they just need him to get there. I don't think, though, that not playing him is the way to do it, right? I think they need to put him on the ice more often. I think they need him to learn from his mistakes, much like they did with both Hutson and other players, Slafkovsky being one of them. They were patient and they allowed him to learn from their mistakes. They need to let Xhekaj do the same thing, despite the fact that, pucks end up in the back of their net. If the goaltending was a little less soft and a little bit better, maybe they might have more patience with Xhekaj. But right now, I think they're putting team results ahead of player development. And that's a change from their early philosophy when they first got hired in Montreal. And that's not a negative thing. It's a positive. But I'd rather see them give him a little bit more. But when it comes to going out and getting a physical defenseman, again, it comes down to what I mentioned before about Parayko. To me, it's more important for them to find a player that fits the system, who can skate. He can be physical too, but it needs to be able to be smart enough to play man-to-man. How many defensemen are there like that in the league? Not very many. Canadians have a few of them. There are a few others out there as well. I mean, it remains to be seen whether or not they'll do it or not. In my world, the ideal guy the Canadians might target is Roman Josi, right? Get him on the Canadians to be that other defenseman, even if he's left-handed, right? Right side's going to take care of itself in a couple of years. But that's a great question, by the way. Let's keep going here. Michael H sounds like a house name. As long as he keeps healthy, he'll be a top center someday. Household name. Okay, you correct yourself on the next line. Way to go, buddy. You're not wrong. He is going to be a household name. But the thing about Hage, the one knock on his game is his face-offs. And that's something he has to work on. And it's something you can learn. It's not, look, it's not as easy a skill as some people think, right? There has to be a focus on it. And there has to be, some players like to take their face-offs the wrong way. Whether it's their sticks too high, sticks too low, too wide a stance. It's a lot like a batting stance for those of you who are baseball fans. Not everybody has the same one, and not everybody hits the same way. And it's the same thing with face-offs. But the idea is to find the best way to win them. Is it with speed? Is it with technique? If you take a look at Joe Thornton, for example, and I've brought him up before, it wasn't about his speed at taking face-offs. It was his hand-eye coordination and his technique taking them. And that comes back to an argument I have with people all the time. Should your kids play hockey 12 months a year, or should they play other sports? My answer is always the same. And whether it's me or whether it's former NHLers that I know, the answer is the same. Let your kids play other sports. Let your kid play baseball, learn how to catch, learn hand-eye coordination by hitting a baseball with a bat, right? Those skills, for as much as they may seem mundane, they actually translate to hockey as well. Your ability to read the puck out of a referee's hand to win faceoffs is just as important as your ability to catch a pitcher throwing the ball and timing it so you can hit it. It's the same idea. Release point, timing, stuff like that. So why not let them play other sports so that they can develop that skill set that they need to be able to be quick enough to have the better hand-eye coordination to win faceoffs? But no, instead, we send our kids to summer camps to learn skills. Skills that they can learn in practice during the regular season, and skills that are being taught to them by guys that are just trying to pad their pockets and trying to say, if you don't come to my camp, you won't make the team next year. And that, my friends, is called extortion. And it shouldn't happen in the game of hockey. And it's part of the reason why the Quebec system is so garbage right now. Because of all these skill camps and the fact that kids can't be kids anymore. They've become machines playing one sport all year round, thinking they're going to be able to specialize when they can't. You honestly think the Zamboni driver wins? You're not wrong either. Being married 27 years takes hair off your head and puts hair on your chest. Yes. But that also comes to having two daughters. If I had a son, maybe that'd be different. But two daughters and a wife, killing me. I wish the Olympics was free broadcasting. What do you mean? If you go to Olympics.com, and what country are you in, No Channel? Because if you go to Olympics.com, normally they have feeds in your own countries to be able to watch the sports. For example, in Canada, the Olympics are broadcast for free online everywhere, right? I believe the website in Canada is cbcolympics.ca. Whether the game is on TSN or the sport is on any other sport, because CBC is the main broadcaster, they stream all the events live. Now, it's available in Canada because, of course, we're Canadian, but I believe there's other sources for that. NBC, for example, in the States, should have that stream, and it should be free, right? If it's not free, man, oh man, the idea of amateur sports has really gone out the window. Keep trying to watch Slav play, and the Slovakia games keep getting cut off by Luz or some other sports starting. Really annoying. I don't know where you're watching, Eve. Are you watching on LDS? or TV Espa. I don't know. But if you watch in English, it doesn't get cut off. They go from end to end when it comes to those games. MUFC. Matthews doesn't have the mentality to play like a proper team player, even if it means playing less minutes in favor of better players. He's so self-centered. Yes, I agree. Totally. That's exactly what I think as well. Here's an interesting thought. Rodney. Redcliffe 27-18. Team Canada is playing Suzuki all wrong. He should be playing center, third or fourth, but center. He is playing center right now, actually. He started on the wing with McDavid, but now he's playing center. So it's not a question. Look, there's a lot of guys on this team that play center. Nathan McKinnon, Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid. When the three of those guys are together, I guarantee you, Sid's the center. McKinnon's the right wing, and McDavid's the left wing. There's a lot of players that were picked to this team, not from a positional perspective, but from a skill perspective. So, yeah, you're going to have guys playing in the wrong positions, right? But Suzuki looked good in the first game on the wing, and he looked good today, not only starting on the wing, but finishing at center. So they can play him anywhere. He's a versatile player, but I don't think they're using him wrong. Coach, do you think that an 82-game schedule is too much? This season has been brutal because of the Olympics. I hope next time the season starts 1 month sooner. That's the trick, Mirage on Ice. It's not about the fact that the season's too long. It's been 82 games forever, right? And there's 32 teams. You got to be able to fit, the amount of games in. But the thing is that they're starting in beginning of October, when they could easily start in September. Minor league seasons start in August. Mind you, the playoffs are a lot earlier. They start in early March. But when you have a season that's that long, and you have events like the World Cup of Hockey, the Four Nations, the Olympics, you want to be able to make up that time rather easily, as opposed to cramming stuff in and making it as compressed as it is right now. So I agree with you. Yes, I would start the season 1 month earlier, but before they do that, they have to go to the bargaining table because it has to be collectively bargained. That's the part that puts in. The players say no, right? The players want to have a little bit of a summer, especially those that go to the Stanley Cup final. They play in June, then they have part of July and August before they have to get back in the rink in September. That's where that gets lost, right? Zarofsky broke the scoring record in the KHL for an 18-year-old. Pretty impressive, that list that he's on top of. Yeah, I agree. But, this year's great. He's going to be there next year and break more records as a 19-year-old. It's definitely cool. I mean, there's no way two ways about that, Apache. I love the way the kid plays. I love how aggressive he is. I love how he's getting points. And I can't wait to see how that's going to turn out when he gets a little bit bigger and stronger, too. Because he's going to need to put on muscle. He's going to need to put on a little bit more size. And so it's impressive now as an 18-year-old. But let's see how that translates before he comes to the NHL. Since you watched Canada versus Switzerland earlier today, how do you explain that the Swiss seem to work a lot harder than the Czechs did, despite the fact that Canada scored 5 goals in each game? One reason that it seemed the Swiss worked harder than the Czechs was the goaltending of Logan Thompson. While, Jordan Binnington got the shutout in game 1, the Swiss did put a lot of pressure on Thompson and did get a lot more quality scoring chances against him versus what the Canadians did versus the Czechs, forcing them to the outside. You rarely saw the Czechs in the middle of the ice getting quality chances. But one of the guys that was most dangerous for the Swiss today was former Habs Sven Andrighetto. Do you remember that name? He was extremely dangerous for the Swiss. So was Nico Hischier. And a lot of their shots were coming from the middle or from the point through screens. That's not what the Czechs did, right? The Swiss forced the Canadian team to collapse down low and create traffic in front of Thompson. And Thompson, to his credit, played extremely well fighting through that. Terry. St. Louis Best Coach Award, Suzuki Top Defenseman, Defensive Forward, so that's a Selke, and Demidov the Calder Trophy. I don't disagree, but last year St. Louis didn't get the nod. This year, for the second year in a row, I hope he does. Because I'd like to get some of the naysayers to stop bashing him for the way he treats the team. Yes, he may be mismanaging Arber Xhekaj, but it may not be him managing Xhekaj's minutes. It could be Stefan Robida, and he needs to be spoken to. But I digress, because I don't know. But for the work that MSL has done, he absolutely deserves to win the Jack Adams. As far as Suzuki's concerned, absolutely deserves to win the Selke because of how he plays a defensive style of game. And Demidov, Rookie of the Year, it all depends, right? Because he looks great out there, but how do you not give it to Kapanen? Jakub Dobeš has gotten 40 of the Canadiens' points this season in his wins. He's a rookie as well. So there's an argument to be had that, hey, the Canadiens might have 2 or 3 guys that might be in consideration for the Calder. Think about that for a minute. Good night, and channel. You're welcome. Watched in English. I don't know why. I also recorded the RDS, Italy, Slafkovsky versus Italy in the title, but then the entire recording was just the Sweden-Finland game. Yeah, that's funny. I don't know why you're having trouble, Evie. All right, gang. That Thompson 3-on-1 save was awesome. Yes, it was. Mirage on Ice, it's not about answering your question. It's about you joining the show. And that goes for all of you. Time for me to say goodnight. Time for you guys to go and enjoy the rest of your night and get ready for Valentine's Day. And again, like I said, make sure you give your loved ones hugs and kisses tomorrow. Spoil them. If you don't already, do it over every night of the year. I should be here tomorrow night. I may not be. I might take the night off because of the fact there's really not much to talk about in Canadiens world. But you never know what might happen. I may have a brainstorm and come up with a subject that's worth talking about. But in the meantime, thank you all. Violet, you get to see Reinbacher and Utica. That's awesome. Let us know how it goes, right? And that those Comets games are always amazing. Anyhow, as I was saying, good night, everybody. Thanks for joining the live stream. And as I always say now is my way to go out, keep your skates on the ice. Keep your skates down and keep your